Then John, just give it 1 more minute. Like I said, Amy will chat you as soon as it's live.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you everyone for joining. We are now live on YouTube. Appreciate everyone who is participating in this press conference to talk about the report of the task force that was co-founded by Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Bolden. And I welcome the media who's joined us. If you'd please make sure you're muted, and we'll get to questions at the end of the program. But at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Chief Justice Beth Clement.
Thanks, John. Good morning, everyone. As Chief Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court, I am honored to welcome everyone who has joined us this morning to brief the news media on the report of the Child Protective Legal Representation Task Force. I am so proud that my dear friends and colleagues, Justices Megan Kavanaugh and Kyra Bolden, stepped up and took the lead, bringing together this task force focused on improving legal representation for some of our state's most vulnerable residents. Protecting children and families is one of the most important functions of our judiciary. Through the work of this task force, Michigan can serve as a model in ensuring that children are protected and all voices are heard throughout the process. Our goal is for children and families to not only better navigate the system, but grow stronger and more successful. That's why I'm so grateful to my colleagues and to everyone who served on the task force and everyone who shared their views. Finally, I want to give a big thanks to our amazing Child Welfare and Juvenile Justice Services Division led by Kelly Wagner. Their hard work and support of the task force has been instrumental in getting this report off the ground. I now turn it over to Justice Megan Kavanaugh to lead the briefing. Justice Kavanaugh?
Thank you, Chief, and good morning to everyone. To say that I'm proud to be a part of the Child Protective Legal Representation Task Force is an understatement, because it is truly a labor of love that I have undertaken with my friend and amazing partner in Justice Kyra Bolden, and a diverse and talented membership of the task force. So in 2023, Justice Bolden and I created the task force along with some others to address the known problems with our current county-based system of legal representation. A system that results in wide disparities in child protective proceedings with respect to, among other issues, how attorneys are paid, how much training and support they have and need to receive, and how actively they must engage in any particular case. So back up a bit, and I want to explain why strong legal representation for parents and children, why that matters. So strong legal representation not only protects fundamental rights and prevents unnecessary family separation, but it can also be a critical factor in improving outcomes in the foster care system. Strong legal representation also serves as a vital bridge of information and empowerment for families who are navigating the child welfare in the foster care system. And strong legal representation ensures that decisions are made based on fair and complete information, and that governmental intervention in the family is conducted only when necessary and when it's lawfully and ethically done. So after many hours of meetings and a wide range of interactive sessions with the public, what did we find? Well, we found that Michigan's current system of providing legal representation to parents and children in child protective proceedings provided vastly different levels of legal support to the parties in these proceedings, depending upon where you were in the state. And that was obviously resulting in equitable treatment. So unfortunately, the reality is that courts across Michigan have been struggling for years to obtain and maintain court-appointed attorneys for this important work. Low funding, competition from other private and publicly funded legal systems, and the complex nature of child protective proceedings are some of the main reasons for this struggle. Not having enough attorneys to represent children and parents in these proceedings is a situation that should just not be happening in our state. So we quickly got to work by soliciting input from a wide array of stakeholders, including parents, children, and the legal community during our public listening tour. We held in-person sessions in Detroit, in Cadillac, in the Upper Peninsula, including Sault Ste. Marie, Marquette, and Gogebic County. We also participated, all the members of the task force participated in virtual proceedings, virtual sessions throughout the state, including in Berrien and Kent County as well. And so we really want to thank all of those communities for welcoming me and Justice Bolden, as well as other task force members, so that we could better understand the issues that are most important to them. We could understand the problems so that we could help work towards solutions. So in addition to compiling this public input, the task force studied the experience of other states in dealing and creating these type of systems. And we also studied models being used in Michigan to represent individuals in other legal settings. The bottom line for this report is really crystal clear. It's establishing a statewide system of legal representation in the child protective system is long overdue. And make no mistake, Justice Bolden and I and the rest of the task force understand that implementing these recommendations will be a very heavy lift, but we are confident that this blueprint, what we have started, is the right way to go. So no doubt there will be suggested improvements and other tweaks along the way, but I am proud that we now have a comprehensive, common sense plan to help children achieve their potential in safe, nurturing homes with loving families, and to protect parents' most cherished right to custody and care for their children. So regarding these reforms, I am pleased to introduce a task force member who played an absolutely critical role in creating the task force and in drafting this report, and that is Professor Vivek Sankaran of the University of Michigan Law School, who serves as the director of its Child Advocacy Law Clinic and Child Welfare Appellate Clinic. So Professor Sankaran,
Thank you
we'd
so
love to
much.
hear from you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Bolden, for leading this initiative. In my mind, this is an important first step to addressing what has been a crisis in our state for so many years. And just to kind of back up one step, I think the work that judges across the state in child welfare proceedings, the work they do, is so hard because we're trying to strike a critical balance between protecting kids and keeping them safe, but also ensuring that kids aren't needlessly separated from families and are returned home quickly when it's safe to do so. And I think what we've seen is that requires the skilled guidance from attorneys who represent both children and parents. As Justice Kavanaugh alluded to, throughout our work on our committee and from my own experience running a clinic at the University of Michigan, far too many parents and children are forced to navigate this system on their own without high quality legal representation. We heard stories of kids not being visited in their foster homes, kids not given a voice in the system. We get phone calls at our clinic routinely from parents who've never spoken to their attorney as they go into a termination of parental rights case. And unfortunately, this happens both at the trial court and appellate level. And as Justice Kavanaugh alluded to as well, part of the crisis is because we have a county-based system where every county in the state of Michigan really has its own way of appointment, of training, of compensation. And so in many ways, we have 83 different systems of legal representation in Michigan right now. And as a result, families' ability to get justice and navigate the court system really depends on where you live and the investment a local county has made in legal representation for children and parents. And especially with recent reforms in other areas like criminal defense, counties are now struggling to find attorneys to even do this work, not to mention high quality legal representation. And so our work in the task force was really an attempt to make recommendations to address this crisis. And the core recommendation that we made in our task force is the establishment of a statewide office to set minimum standards for training, ensure standard and fair compensation across the board, monitor attorney performance, ensure training requirements for those attorneys, but really to address this disparity and to ensure that there is a basic level of quality for attorneys who do this work. Our hope as well is that this office will provide needed support for attorneys doing this work. Right now, the reality for so many attorneys doing this work is that they're working in islands. They're just doing it on their own, doing the best that they can with limited resources, and they have no sense of community, no sense of support, no supervision. And the hope is by creating this office, we would address some of those things, as well as give them access to resources. For example, growing research is showing that access to things like experts and investigators and social workers as part of the legal team is really the best practice to ensuring that courts are best equipped to make good decisions for kids. And in Michigan, all too often, the attorneys that do this work don't have access to those services because their counties don't have the funds or haven't invested in them. And so our hope is that by creating this statewide office, we will ensure that attorneys have the tools they need to help guide families through the system. I will say that we had good models that we relied upon from other places across the country that are just a little bit ahead of us in this journey to address this crisis. And so we looked at states like Washington State and Colorado and Arkansas, which all have statewide systems in different forms. And I think one of the things that all three of those jurisdictions have reported back to us is what a big success it has been, not just in making sure that families get the quality legal representation that they need, but also they've seen cost savings as a result of that. And that's an important thing to point out, is that while this is an upfront investment for the state, what the research has shown us is that not only do families get better quality legal representation, the system saves money because foster care is an incredibly expensive investment, where it is needed sometimes. But if we can shorten stays of kids to either go back home or find another placement, perhaps with a family member, if we can prevent the needless removal of kids from their parents because of quality legal representation, we can save significant monies that can be spent on perhaps investing in families before they get involved with child welfare services. And so I think this is a win-win in the sense that it represents an opportunity to address a crisis, but also potentially save the state millions of dollars. There are other recommendations we make in the report as well that involve ensuring that kids have a voice in the process by changing some of the court forms and requirements to ensure that trial courts are getting these views out, to make sure that DHHS, and they're doing, I think, an excellent job of trying to tap into federal funding for legal representation to make sure that counties really take advantage of it. But the core recommendation that we make is that the system of disparity needs to stop, because we can't afford anymore to do nothing, because families are struggling, kids are staying in foster care unnecessarily too long. And our hope is through this process, we will address this crisis. Happy to answer questions later on about any of the specifics in the report.
Thank you, Professor Sankaran. I appreciate it. Now I want to welcome Task Force member Judge Tina Yost Johnson. She's the judge of the 37th Circuit Court in Calhoun County, and valuable task force member. So Judge Yost Johnson.
Thank you, Justice Kavanaugh. First, I'd like to thank the justices for taking on this monumental project to improve the legal services for families and children. They continue to work on these projects, and it's greatly appreciated from those of us who are on the front line. They want to hear our voices, and hearing the voices of those of us who do this work on a daily basis, as well as those who are involved in the system, is key to making sure we improve it. The judicial process is more than just a judge in a courtroom. For justice to be served, we need good prosecutors, good caseworkers, but we need good attorneys guiding our parents and children. The legal system can be a frightening place, and the difference in how a process works can completely depend on the quality of the legal representation before us. You hear in sports that winning is accomplished in the preparation phase, not the execution phase. Well, justice is achieved when families and their children are properly prepared for their day in court. It increases confidence in the court system. That meaning not someone wins, but that when they are done, regardless of the outcome, they feel like they had a fair day, like their voice was heard. In this matter, for us to be effective, we have to rely on the information that's given to us. I don't have a crystal ball. I have to make my decisions based on the facts and information that's brought to me. And if we don't have quality legal representation, then those facts aren't brought to me. To know that I am making the right decision is key in knowing that families are getting their proper day on court. And the focus has to be on the children from the start. Children are harmed by abuse and neglect, but they are also harmed by unnecessary removal and separation from their families. No judge wants to make the wrong decision, and the decisions we make forever change the trajectory of the children's lives, and that weighs heavy on us. So it was very important to bring that information forward, and these recommendations are going to help judges ensure that we have the right facts to make the right decisions. And imagine being a family who has just had your child removed, and you come into a court system that maybe you've never stepped into a court before. Good legal advice can make the difference between having your children removed or having your children returned. Parents are scared. They don't know what path to follow. A good attorney is going to come in, is going to ask the right questions and make sure that I, as the judge, am informed of the advice and of the facts that I need to be informed of. In those cases where a parent should be reunited, making sure that we know if a parent needs special accommodations. Having an attorney who is properly trained, who has that legal system of support, who knows the resources in the community, who has investigators to help them get extra information. How fast we move cases completely depends on that. And we know that there's more satisfaction in the system when people get their day in court timely. And not just that, but we know that when children are reunited quickly, there's less trauma to them. Having knowledge about the whole system, ancillary cases. Many of our families are involved in criminal cases, protection orders, divorce, custody, parenting time, which order controls. I've had attorneys give parents, unfortunately, inaccurate advice because they didn't realize that there were more orders than one. So making sure that we have attorneys who are trained and effective is highly important. Good attorneys don't wait for a plan to be presented. They bring the needs of the families to the court. So this process is going to help judges ensure that we have the right facts. It will give the parties direction from day one. It will give them a voice, which is very important, and not just the parents a voice, but the children a voice. When I first started in this area, we had the idea that we had to protect children from a system telling them about what was happening with their families. And we've learned from listening to children who have aged out of the system that it's very important to hear the voice of the children. They know what's going on. They lived it. We need to hear from them. We need to hear what they want. This will increase confidence in the system, by separating the attorneys from the court. When parents see the whole unit as one thing, they don't have confidence in the system. When they understand their attorney is truly separate, that they're giving them independent advice, it increases their confidence and they feel that they have a chance in the system. Attorneys also feel that independence. They feel that they can advocate stronger in talking to attorneys, whether or not they request a jury trial, a motion for reconsideration. They're not worried that they can take the time to prepare their case the way they feel it needs to be prepared, not based on some arbitrary pay scale of how many visits they should have. This new plan would ensure quality, the minimum standards, the training, the caseload caps is very important. I have attorneys who are trying to take on way too many cases. some because they're not fairly compensated, some because they just don't understand limitations. So it's very important for them to have enough time to properly represent, to make those visits, to ensure that they understand their clients' needs. As I stated, fair pay and mentorship is big. We want to retain the brightest and best attorneys in this area. We want them to make sure that their cases are properly prepared and that they are ready for their day in court. All of this, the guidance, the making sure that the families know their path, having the proper legal representation, it is going to allow us to have a faster legal process. If everyone is in court on their day, prepared to present the information, I can move the case twice as fast. We will have less adjournments. I adjourn hearings on a regular basis because I do not have attorneys, or I'm trying to share attorneys with another courtroom because they're pulled in too many directions. We'll get more attorneys that are committed to this area. I've had attorneys tell me these cases are very tough. They take a lot of preparation. It's not just reading a statute and applying it. They have to know the case law, and sometimes years of case law that makes a difference in the interpretation. They have to be able to understand the services and the needs of families. They have to handle families with difficult life circumstances that may be emotional or may react differently than you'd expect. We see people sometimes on their worst day. So it has to be someone who is dedicated to this work, and to get good, dedicated people, they need to be fairly compensated. And we need to be able to accomplish the right result for the right reason. So when we brought these concerns, the minimum standards, the making sure that the compensation matched the work that the attorneys were doing, that we made sure that they could choose the path that they wanted for representing their clients, in being able to have experts, in being able to have the backup that they needed for having advice, or that team, as we heard Vivek say. And most importantly, that they had the ability to take the time to meet with their clients, to understand their clients' needs, and to properly present that information to the court system, with having the training and the experience they needed to do that. So again, I'm just very grateful that this has been done, and that this is going to make trial court judges' lives easier, because we know that the parties in front of us are going to have satisfaction in the system, and that they are going to be prepared to come before us, instead of a system where they feel like their case is being moved down the line, or they don't have enough time because they haven't been prepared properly before they reach my doors. So I just thank all the parties who participated in this, and I look forward to its implementation.
Thank you, Judge Yost Johnson. Your perspective is invaluable, and we really are grateful to have the support of your support and of so many others. Contribution of state leaders on this effort. And in that regard, I want to introduce our next speaker, who is one of 5 state legislators that served on the task force, and that is Senator Sam Singh of the 28th Senate District, which includes Ingham County and much of mid-Michigan. Senator Singh.
Thank you very much, Justice Kavanaugh. I want to thank you, as well as Justice Bolden, for inviting the legislature to serve on this task force. Along with myself, we've had Representative Christine Morris, Representative Kelly Breen, Representative Stephanie Young, and Representative Kara Hope. I think it was very helpful for us to sort of hear from our local partners from various district courts and different counties, to sort of understand the discrepancies that we are seeing in the amount of compensation and training that is provided by county. As we learned more from some of the different states, whether it was Colorado, Washington, New Mexico, we definitely saw this statewide office being a central part of those states moving forward in this space in a more effective way. I think in Michigan, we actually have a roadmap from others that have sort of come before us. the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission, as well as the Michigan State Appellate Defender Office. Those processes have come before us, which the legislature provided the development of these offices. The conversations from there then came into how do we adequately fund this, whether through state and local resources. So, our hope now that this report has been finalized, that we will bring it forward to the 4 quadrant leaders on both sides of the aisle and both sides of the Capitol building. And then we'll begin to work with the appropriate committees moving into next year's session. We'll start the drafting process fairly quickly, working with the fiscal agencies about the fiscal impact of the creation of this office. This office has a larger vision than just being a statewide office. We also hope to have regional representation from this office throughout the state as well. And so we'll have to take a look at how we fund that from the local standpoint, the state standpoint. As many of you have heard and seen in the report, there's obviously been federal opportunities for access for some of these services. But I do think it was very compelling, as we heard, whether it was the public testimony or just the live testimony from the people who participated in this process, that it is, I think, essential for us to create the statewide parent and child legal representation office, that we create these standards for the lawyers, whether it's through training, making sure that there's caps on the number of cases, but in the end, also dealing with the adequate compensation side of this. And so I look forward as we move into our new session next year to look at how we implement this through the legislative process. I know my colleague, Rep. Stephanie Young, is on this call as well, and I know she's looking forward to this conversation in her chamber as well. So I want to thank everyone for the participation. I look forward to working on this very important issue as we move into the new year.
Thank you, Senator Singh. And yes, I was going to point out, thank you to Representative Young, who's also on the call. A couple other people that are on the call, just so that that have served as a task force. I want to publicly thank them. Josh Pease, Kristen Staley, Lisa Speaker, and then from our team here at the Supreme Court and State Court Administrative Office, Alicia Moon and Elizabeth Rios, who all worked together on this. And so I'm grateful for your participation on the task force and for being here today. But now I'm pleased to introduce my colleague and co-liaison on all child welfare matters, Justice Kyra Harris Bolden. Excuse me. Go ahead, Justice Bolden.
Thank you so much, Justice Kavanaugh, and thank you so much to all of our task force members. Being here, even via Zoom, with other members of our task force reminds me that we are stronger together. From the 3 branches of the state government to our tribal partners, our collaboration with a variety of stakeholders has helped us to thoroughly explore how child protective legal proceedings operate in our state so that we could determine where improvements were needed. In order to get a complete picture of the system, we literally needed to meet people where they are. Hearing from residents across the state with lived experiences so we could identify systemic barriers, so high quality child protective legal representation, and seek ideas on how to tear down those barriers. This was the trust behind our listening tour each year that we had the task force that enabled the task force to hear from hundreds of people in all corners of our state. Justice Kavanaugh in the UP and me in Detroit. Task force members felt it was important that the in-person listening sessions we conducted included separate times for families, for attorneys, and for court personnel so that they could provide their comments without any pressure or influence from other stakeholders. We also held remote sessions and collected written comments. I was really struck by some of the startling data we compiled. For instance, over 50% of youths surveyed indicated that their lawyer guardian ad litem did not meet with them outside of the court. 40% of parents reported that their attorney did not meet with them outside of court hearings, or they did not feel they were able to talk to their attorneys when issues came up. And 50% of parents expressed a belief that their attorney did not effectively advocate for them in court. And following just a few examples of direct comments from children in the system regarding their legal representation, I had very limited exposure to my guardian ad litem, so I did not feel I was being represented. Never talked to her. She's never contacted me at all, and she doesn't know what I want. I try to tell her things, but then she just blows it off like it's not a big deal. The court was a scary place, so I didn't want to go. Maybe a more regular visit outside the courtroom might be helpful. As hard as it is to absorb such feedback, this kind of public engagement has been vital to our work because it helps us tell the whole story. And I want to thank everyone who took part in these listening sessions and the public comment period. Their input is the reason why we are here today, promoting recommendations that will result in a system that effectively protects children and families across the state of Michigan. Now I turn it back over to Justice Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Justice Bolden, and thanks to all of our speakers. I also wanted to say that, as you'll see, one of the recommendations in the report is that the State Court Administrative Office modifies its child protective court forms to ensure that trial courts actually obtain the wishes of children when and as required by law. And that's a recommendation of the task force. There are a number of steps and a number of recommendations that didn't need to wait to be implemented. And our State Court Administrative Office is jumped right on it, and we are close to releasing those forms. So that is good news. These are all improvements. So now we want to acknowledge members of the news media who are joining us and open it up to them to ask questions about the task force recommendations. If you could, please click the raised hand icon on Zoom. And once your mic is on, be sure to tell us your name and the outlet that you represent. And if you don't direct your question to anyone in particular, we will sort of help suggest who is the best person to reply. So. Open it up. Any raised hands? Here we go. John King, it looks like.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Excellent. This is John King with Michigan Advance. I guess this question would probably best be directed at Senator Singh. In terms of being able to fund this significant change to the system, where will that come from? How will that be implemented? What are the hurdles to make that happen in order to establish this statewide office that would then have authority over 83 counties? And do you anticipate resistance from at the county level, or are they looking for help in this regard, do you think? So
I think Senator Singh had to drop off, unfortunately. And obviously that's not sort of in the judicial wheelhouse, if you will. I think in general, though, I can say about the report that this is sort of the framework of what we think a system should look like and where it should be housed. And like I said, there are a lot of details to work out. A huge one, as you've mentioned, is the funding. What does that look like? Where does it come from? How is the support generated? And where this system gets housed, and all of those things. So this is, you highlight a very important question. That is the next stage of working, with this report to sort of get that. And honestly, because recognizing that is such a critical piece of this, obviously, is why we wanted to make sure that we had legislators involved in the task force, hearing from, all the meetings that we had, hearing from other states, what that looked like, including issues with funding, And then hearing from, on these listening tours, hearing from people across the state of what's needed. And so we were very grateful to have them there. And I think they were a critical aspect of having that, because they are going to be a critical a player in the actual implementation of what this will look like once it gets off the ground. Anybody else have anything else to say?
Well, Justice Kavanaugh, I would just add in to John's question that I don't expect resistance from counties at all. In fact, I think what we heard throughout the work of our task force is the opposite, that counties are really struggling right now to find high quality lawyers to even do the work. And so it is, county administrator after administrator has sort of shared with us that they cannot find people to handle both trial court appointments and appellate appointments in this field. So I anticipate that they'll welcome the assistance. I would also note that in our report, the statewide agency has certain functions that we're recommending, but also the counties are going to be, the attorneys are going to be in the counties. There's no sort of notion of replacing the attorneys necessarily that are doing good work in the counties. It's just that a statewide entity would be responsible for training them, making sure that they're of the quality that we want, and then ensuring sort of a standard. But I also think that because of other reforms that have happened in the state with Michigan, the criminal defense sort of realm, I think counties have seen some of the benefits of it, and so they're sort of primed for a model like what we're offering. And so I actually think it's going to be the opposite, that I think counties are just tired right now. They're tired of trying to scramble, as Judge Yost Johnson pointed out, scrambling to find someone to show up to court on an emergency, and it's just been really tough in so many places.
Yeah, and I saw Representative Young, you came on camera. I'm hoping you obviously would have a great deal of insight on this issue as well.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to add that when we look at this work, and we know that in our state, the most vulnerable, when we're dealing with our children, we will find a way to fund it. I just wanted to say that because we fund what's important. We fund those things that are necessary in community, and keeping families together and keeping children safe is at the top of the list. So is that going to be a process? John, like anybody else, we understand the appropriations process, but this is a top priority, because if we're not the ones considering how our children are best cared for, then who will? And that just means to me that we're going to do the work as the legislature to identify those areas where we'll be able to put the money into starting up this new department within the state. So just wanted to add that little tidbit.
Thank you, Representative Young. Any other questions? Lauren Gibbons.
Yeah, hi, this is Lauren Gibbons with Bridge, Michigan. You mentioned, Justice Kavanaugh, that there are a few things from the report that courts can get started on now. Could you elaborate a little bit more on some of the efforts that can start without legislative input?
Sure. So yes, one of those being the forms, as I had mentioned. We have a division within our state court administrative office that is continually looking at forms and making sure that they reflect what's required in the law. Those forms obviously go a long way to help ensure that those requirements are being met. And so that is something that we started. Some of the other recommendations, and this is a big one, that all counties work with the Department of Health and Human Services to determine how to access federal Title IV funding available to enhance legal representation in the county. And quite frankly, the courts and DHHS have been doing this for a while. And in fact, one of the things that we learned in going about on the public listening tour is the ways in which certain counties are in fact taking advantage of federal funds through to be able to and use that extra money to compensate attorneys for the work that they're actually doing. Like Judge Yost Johnson indicated, a lot of this, so much of this work is really done outside of court, right? And it's done in the sort of multidisciplinary team system and prevention work and trying to get services. So many issues that bring families into contact with the court system a lot of times have to deal with a lot of other issues, right? Housing, poverty, transportation, divorce, custody, other issues, and having an attorney that can be paid and adequately and supported to give their time to help remedy some of those issues can prevent some unnecessary separation and unnecessary involvement of families with the court system. So we have started that. I know back a number of years when I first got on the bench, Chief Justice Clement and I worked personally with a number of counties to make them aware of the funds that are available through Title 4E to use specifically for attorney legal representation. And a lot of counties are doing that to supplement the pay and also to pay attorneys to attend training, to put on training and put it and then pay attorneys to be able to do that. And so that is something that we can do outside of the creation of this office. These are funds that are available and people need to be made aware of them and perhaps supported in accessing them. And really a big part of what our group does through Kelly Wagner, through SCAO, is letting them know what other counties are doing, right? So that they may not be aware of how they can use these funds and how they can do some of those things. And so connecting them through that, because what we learned through the listening tours, obviously we know our state is very diverse. It's very geographically diverse. It's very diverse in the number of attorneys. There's a big difference between how many attorneys are available in Wayne and Kent County to do this work versus Gogebic County or Marquette, some of whom have, you can count on one hand attorneys who are covering 4 counties that take 3 hours to get across, right? And so that looks very different. And a point to what Vivek had said about this is there are some things that work in the existing county system. Some counties do some things really well. And we want to balance the need for sort of a statewide system that can give the support and compensation and training and set standards without hopefully losing some of those benefits that individual counties have done for what works in their community, which may not work in another community. We don't want, the sort of one size fits all that cuts out some of those things that actually work well. So that is one of it. One of the other recommendations is for SCAO to continue to provide training to judges and attorneys on the importance of hearing directly from youth. Like I said, SCAO and our Michigan Judicial Institute does a lot of training. Professor Sankaran is one of our star trainers in so many different type of training in this area. So we provide a lot of training, and we want to make sure that attorneys know that specifically with respect to some of the things we learned about the importance of having children's voices heard. And our SCAO department as well, we have a youth advocate. That lived experience is critically important to have that voice heard when we're formulating what training is needed and what type of support and systems should be in place. So some of that outside of the creation of the statewide legal system, the number of recommendations in the report can be and have already been started to be implemented, but just enhanced, and that's the recommendations. Sure. See everyone here. Any other questions? All right. I do not see any, and we are getting close. We're out of time. So I want to thank Chief Justice Clement, Justice Bolden, Professor Sankaran, Judge Yost Johnson, Senator Singh, Rep Young, all the other members of the task force who were here, not only for being here today, but for all the work that you put into this. I want to thank the reporters who joined us and everyone who watched the live stream for taking part in this today. And now is the time for the task force to work towards making these recommendations a reality for people we serve. As we indicated, we have a lot of work ahead of us, and we're excited to get started. So thank you all for your time today.